So let's be honest, you don't have a single fucking clue how to determine daily bias. You're looking at order blocks, mitigation blocks, breaker blocks, fair value gaps, sweeps or liquidity, all to determine your bias, and you're sat there sweating in your chair. So now it's time I revealed the correct way to determine daily bias inside of any session. London, New York, Asia. This is the correct way to determine daily bias without the stress or hassle of using every PD array to do with ICT trying to determine your daily bias. Let's get into this video without wasting any of you guys' time. So now we're diving into the core content of this video, daily bias. The reason why many of you guys have been struggling with your overall daily bias is because you've been overcomplicating it to the point where you're almost second guessing yourself on where price is actually going to go, and you don't have a proven, structured, simplistic method to determine daily bias each day, which I'm going to reveal to you guys now. I know many of you guys watching this video currently determine daily bias of, say, are we above or below the midnight open price, the New York open price, order blocks, breaker blocks, mitigation blocks, sweeps of liquidity, unfilled imbalances, new day opening gaps, new week opening gaps, and you're probably sat there thinking, how can I put all of this together? Because there's always going to be something going against something, and then our bias is absolutely all over the place. Without wasting any time, let's dive straight into the charts. Okay, so now we've pulled up the charts. I'm going to give you guys the checklist in order to determine daily bias each day. So daily bias is determined purely off imbalances and imbalances only. We don't determine our bias off anything else. We don't look at order blocks, breaker blocks, or anything else that I mentioned previously. We only determine our bias off the most recent imbalance. And you're probably thinking, how effective is this? Well, it's actually the most effective way, which I've actually backtested this for over years and years of price action, which you guys can do yourself. It's the most simplistic and effective way in order to determine bias. The one rule that applies with this bias is that we assume a fair value gap is respected. We only determine our bias of the most recent imbalance that we're currently inside on that time frame. We assume the fair value gap, if we trade into a fair value gap, bearish or bullish, we assume it's respected, therefore we take that as our bias, unless it is disrespected / inversed. If the gap gets inversed, then your bias is going to switch towards a draw on the next high or bearish imbalance. For example, if we trade into a bearish imbalance on any time frame, we assume a bearish bias on that time frame unless it gets disrespected. Therefore, once it gets inversed, then the draw is going to be the next high or the next bearish imbalance above. For a bullish imbalance, we assume the bullish imbalance is respected. If it gets inversed, then the draw is going to be the next low or the next bullish imbalance on that time frame below. So the approach to determining bias is that we start on the daily, then we work our way down through the time frames, and we get a specific result for each time frame as we work our way down. And to many of you guys, this is going to be an absolute game changer, which it was for me. When I started determining bias this way, I found everything to be so much more clear and so much simpler and effective for when approaching the New York AM session. So we get a specific result without comparing or looking at other time frame results. We only look at each time frame individually and get an individual result. At the end, you're going to have 5 results, either bullish, bearish, or neutral for each one. And then you're either going to lean towards more bullish overall, bearish overall, or neutral. With a neutral bias, we sit there, we approach price, we let the New York open either go towards buy side or sell side. Then as price moves during the New York AM session and takes out points of buy side and sell side, you must reevaluate your bias to see, okay, I was neutral, but now we've taken out London highs. Potentially, we're going to be having a shift in bias here from neutral to either bearish or bullish potentially. Many people get caught up on the same bias all the way through the New York AM session and even going into the PM session as well. It's very important to, when you determine a bias, your bias is a bias until a certain point. Once that level has been met, say on the 15-minute, if we're in a 15-minute bullish gap, we assume that's respected. The draw is going to be the next 15-minute high on that specific time frame. So if that high does get taken, then the bias will be 50-50, unless now we've traded into a 15-minute bearish gap. Then you're already starting to see a shift from the 15 to go from bullish to now bearish, because we've met the draw, then we've traded into a 15-minute bearish gap. So to visually put this into perspective for you guys, I'm going to go over at least 4 to 5 examples of determining bias so you guys are familiar with this. Then after this video, I want you guys to take this away onto TradeSeller or even TradingView and backtest this yourself and get familiar with determining bias so we are ready for the next New York AM session. So let's get straight into it. So I've just pulled up a random day in 2024 in October. I didn't want to find a day recently of price action that we're already familiar with, so I've pulled up a random day. Each day we start on the daily time frame. Doesn't matter whether you're on Monday, Friday, Wednesday, it doesn't matter what day it is. We're going to look at the daily time frame and see on NQ which imbalance are we currently in. So right now we're not in a daily bullish imbalance. In fact, we are in a daily bearish imbalance as of this day to the left. Therefore, we can write down that we have a 1-day result as bearish. That's it. So our daily bias is bearish. Now, on the 4-hour time frame, we need to see, are we in a 4-hour bullish or bearish gap or nothing? So the way we determine that is not by understanding that we're in a daily bearish gap. We only specifically look at each time frame for each specific result. So by looking to the left, I can see that we have a 4-hour bearish fair value gap, which as of now has actually been inversed. If you guys zoom in just slightly, you can see the 4-hour bearish gap has actually been inversed. Therefore, the draw on the 4-hour time frame trading into the 4-hour I-fully gap is now going to be bullish towards the next 4-hour high. So now we have a 4-hour result as bullish. So far, bearish and bullish is going to lead towards neutral as it's 50-50. We're going to look on the hourly time frame now and determine a bias on the hourly time frame. By looking at the hourly, you can currently see we're assuming the fair value gap is respected as this candle is still open on TradeZeller. Therefore, we're going to assume this bearish gap is respected unless it gets disrespected. Therefore, we're currently in a bearish gap. Our bias on the hourly is bearish. Now, by looking at the 15-minute time frame, we want to mark out the imbalances that we can currently see that we've traded out of, which is this 15-minute bullish gap, and also a very, very slim 15-minute bearish fair value gap there, which you guys can see. So indeed, the 15-minute bearish gap has been inversed. Therefore, the draw out of the 15-minute bullish gap upon the inverse of the bearish gap is bullish towards the next 15-minute high. So we've got a 15-minute result as bullish. Therefore, so far, we're leaning towards an overall neutral bias. Now let's see the 5-minute time frame as the final time frame to monitor. Okay, so on the 5-minute time frame, understanding when we draw out of an imbalance, the draw is going to be towards the next high. So in this case, we've traded into the 5-minute bullish gap for the draw to be the next high. Now the draw on the 5-minute has been met, so it'd be 50-50. Upon taking the high, price has actually traded and still respected the 5-minute bearish gap, which is the more recent gap that we've actually traded into on the 5-minute time frame. So our 5-minute bias is now bearish. We was bullish towards the high got swept, so we're 50-50, and now we're respecting and trading out of a 5-minute bearish gap. So our bias on the 5-minute is bearish. So as of now, we have 3 bearish and 2 bullish. Therefore, overall bias leans 60%, 3 out of 5 as bearish. Does not mean that we have a strong bias, but our overall bias is going to be bearish as of now for the New York Open. So we're going to look for a sweep of buy side and a potential opportunity for shorts as of now going into that first day of macro. That's how we would determine bias each day. So now let's show you guys another example. So I'm going to pull up a random Wednesday, 16th of October. We're going to start on the daily time frame and determine bias once again. One thing to mention, as we currently are at all-time highs for price, if you're not inside an imbalance and you don't understand the draw, the bias is neutral on that time frame. If you're in a bullish gap, your bias is bullish. A bearish gap, your bias is bearish. Inverse, then the bias inverses towards the next draw. And if you're not in an imbalance, it's neutral. Okay, so by looking at the daily time frame, just a couple weeks after the point that we just done, the daily bearish imbalance to the left already got inversed, as we already know. Now you can see price has actually traded back into this daily I-fully gap. Therefore, the draw is higher on the daily time frame after inversing that daily bearish gap towards the next high. So we can write down once again as the daily to be bullish. Now let's have a look at the 4-hour time frame. So the most recent gap that we've actually traded out of is this bearish gap, which you can see here. And we're also trading out of a bullish gap as well, simultaneously, which is this 4-hour bullish gap. So you're probably thinking, what do you take to be your bias in this scenario? We're trading out of a bullish gap, therefore the draw is higher towards the next high. And we're also trading out of a bearish gap, therefore the draw is the low. In this case, you're just going to run a 50-50 bias, as you do not have a clue where price is going to go. Technically, the draw is both ways, so our bias is neutral. Now we're going to look at the hourly time frame and see what hourly gap are we currently trading out of. As you can see here, we're currently trading out of an hourly bullish fair value gap, and we're not actually trading out of an hourly bearish gap. In fact, we have an hourly bearish gap above, which is unfilled. Therefore, that's going to be a draw for price towards 2447 on that unfilled hourly bearish gap. So our bias here is going to be hourly as bullish. So 15-minute. Right, so looking at the 15-minute time frame, you can see as of now, the only imbalance that we're currently trading out of, as there's no imbalances here, and these imbalances have been inverse, such as the bearish imbalances, is this bullish 15-minute imbalance. Therefore, our bias is bullish towards the next 15-minute high, which is going to be this one. And you want to mark out these levels as the overall draw for price on the 15 minutes here. Once we take out this high, would be neutral, 50-50, unless we trade into a bearish gap, which we won't. So if we take this high, we're no longer bullish on the 15, we'll be 50-50. So we can write our 15-minute result to be bullish. So now let's take a look at the 5-minute time frame as well. Okay, so by looking at the 5-minute time frame as of now, you can see we was inside a 5-minute bullish gap, which got inversed. Therefore, the draw is going to be the next 5-minute low. We've swept the next 5-minute low and also traded into a 5-minute bullish gap. Another confluence is that we do have an SMT at this low. So ES has already taken that low as well and traded into a 5-minute bullish gap. So our bias here on the 5-minute time frame is going to be bullish. So our overall bias here is bullish. Okay, so presenting another example here, starting on the daily time frame. This is a more recent example in May. And we was trading out of a daily bearish imbalance, which we would actually take as a daily bearish bias, then traded back into a daily bullish imbalance. Therefore, our bias on the daily as of this day is going to be bullish. Okay, so looking at the 4-hour time frame as of now, we've traded into a 4-hour bullish gap and we're not inside of a bearish gap. Therefore, a 4-hour bias is going to be bullish. So now on the hourly time frame, as you can see, we're currently trading out of an hourly bullish fair value gap and an hourly bearish fair value gap simultaneously. Therefore, our hourly bias is going to be neutral. So looking at the 15-minute time frame, we're currently trading out of a 15-minute bullish imbalance and a 15-minute bearish imbalance. Therefore, our bias is also going to be neutral on the 15-minute time frame. Now, on the 5-minute time frame, you can currently see we're trading out of a 5-minute bearish fair value gap. If you actually zoom in, it's been inversed just slightly. Therefore, the draw is going to be the next 5-minute bearish imbalance or the next 5-minute high, which in this case, the first high is closer than the imbalance, which would be the draw. So the 5-minute is going to be bullish. So we have an overall bullish bias, 3 out of 5 to be bullish. So let's fast forward price and actually put our bias to the test on a specific day. And obviously our bias is a bias until a certain point. So the 5-minute is bullish until this point. Then on the 15-minute, we're currently neutral, as we determined. The hourly was also neutral. The 4-hour is bullish until we either take a 4-hour high or trade into a 4-hour bearish imbalance. Then the daily is going to be bullish until we trade into a daily bearish gap or actually take the high. Okay, so as you can see there, immediately at the New York Open, we've gone straight for that point of buy side. Therefore, the 5-minute bias has now been met of being bullish and we've actually taken the high. So from taking the high would be 50-50 on the 5-minute. And now we've traded into a 5-minute bearish gap. So upon trading into the 5-minute bearish gap, you'd be bearish. We've then traded back into the 5-minute bullish gap. So now the 5-minute is now bullish. And there you have it. You can see our overall bias on that day was correct. And this way that I determine bias to you guys is generally the most efficient, simplistic way that everyone should determine bias when trading ICT without overcomplicating it by looking at many different PD arrays at once and just massively overcomplicating it for yourselves for no apparent reason. If you guys have found this video useful, to a lot of you, I know it has made a massive change. Drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel as you may not see my face again. And also drop a comment like you did on the last video that I dropped on what you guys recommend or would like to see in future videos on this channel. And until the next one, have a great rest of your day.